All right, everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome to day 7 of the month of metal. Today I am painting a Scaly for the Scavvies gang of Necromunda. This guy was originally released back in 1997 and was sculpted by Colin Dixon. I've linked down in the description the story, I guess, of how Colin Dixon got his job at Games Workshop. It's a pretty hilarious story, to be honest. And if you want to check that out, like I said, the link is in the description below. But I started off here by priming the miniature in black and then zenithaling him with pale clamshell from Krylon. And then I started with Poxwalker, and this is a shade paint, although I'm using it as a contrast paint essentially. And I just apply this all over the skin. Reading up on the Scalies, they are sometimes described as having like distressed or bruised skin, and so that's the look I'm going for here. So I put this all over the skin, and then I waited for it to dry and actually did a second coat of this to get a more solid color. And then, of course, we'll come back and do more to it once this is all dry. So then I moved on to doing that bruising. And for this, I used Magos Purple, and I focused on the recesses of the arm or of the skin here. I didn't want to take away the green that I had put on. I just wanted to, in addition to the green, show this purple. And the purple and the green combined, in my opinion, really give this like bruised or damaged skin look. If you get a little bit of this like out on the green, it's not a big deal. You know, the bruising has just gone a little bit farther. And I also made sure to make sure. I also made sure to make sure to get this purple paint in the recesses where the skin meets something else, just to give that sort of illusion of maybe his the rope that he has on him or whatever is actively bruising the skin. So then for the final sort of wash on this guy, just to help this skin look, I used some Bad Moon Yellow, and I just did that all around the scales that I'm going to paint in the next step. Just to sort of, I've always found I've painted a lot of Nurgle stuff, and so I've always found that a good combination to get bad looking skin is green, purple, and yellow, and so that's what I did here. A lot of this yellow is going to get covered up once we paint the scales, but for right now, um, I get it in there, and it will show just a little bit through the cracks and crevices in the scales. So then, while I let that dry, I just got some Doomfire Magenta and just painted the inside of his mouth and his tongue. Uh, this will be really the final look. I'm going to shade it a little bit and I'll paint the teeth, but really just a color that pops nicely with the green and call it done. Then going back to the skin, I grabbed some Amulet Aqua and I just painted the scales with this. Just being very careful to not let the paint run into the crevices between the scales, and making sure to get nice solid coverage on each of these. These are maybe a little more contrasty with the skin than I would have gone for originally, but I'm actually pretty happy with how it came out. I think they pop nicely on the miniature, especially with the rest of the miniature being more dull. These really stand out, and I'm happy with them. Then we moved on to the classic snakebite leather, and I used this, believe it or not, to paint the leather on this guy. I just did all the leather in this color. You probably could separate it out on like his wrist wraps and his loincloth and the belt around him and all that, but I just painted everything with snakebite leather. That was good enough for me, and with the shading we'll do later, I was happy with it. Then I got some skeleton horde and just painted the ropes with this. Nothing crazy again, just single coat and we're good to go. We'll come back later and shade it, of course, but for right now, this is a great base coat. Then I wanted to do a little something different with the wood here. I knew I wanted to make it pretty distressed looking. I don't know how this guy got his hands on wood in the underhives, but who knows? The black market is a mysterious creature. So I knew I wanted to make this wood pretty distressed, and I knew I was going to come back later with a bluish wash for the metal and probably work some of that into the wood. And so I went with a red, more red tone here. And I went with Reichland Flesh Shade, and I went with that specifically over a contrast paint like Gore-Grunt Fur, for example, because I knew that I could build this up in layers more easily without completely coating it like a Gore-Grunta would. Then I took some rough iron, and I just painted the barrel of the gun with this. I was originally going to do the barrel silver, but I figured it would make a little more sense that the barrel maybe isn't made of the best material. It's not made of like shiny steel or something. It's made out of a rougher iron, you might say. And so I decided to use this color. Then I took some plate mail metal and just base coated basically all the other metal on this guy. So that's these brackets here that's holding the barrel to the wood of the gun. And then he's got a belt buckle on his belt on the back, and then a ring around his, or attached to the leather going around his foot. Then I started in on the washes. So I started first here with just a simple Agrax Earthshade, and I put this all over the leather. Again, like I mentioned earlier, I also focused this in the crevices that are between where the leather is and where they meet something else, usually the skin on this model. So you really get that hard line between the leather and whatever they're touching. Then I got some Space Wolves Gray. This is that blue wash that I was talking about earlier. And I put that first on the plate mail metal that I had already applied, but then also I worked this in to the cracks in between the rough iron and the plate mail, and then also onto this Reichland Flesh Shade wood that we did. This combination of the reddish wood plus the bluish wash, I think goes really well together and really gives a sense of the distressed nature of this wood. Then while I was waiting for my washes to dry, I just grabbed some Great Hall Gray and I base coated the nails and the teeth. Then I got some Afterglow and just did a little dot in each eyeball here just to show something. I'm not trying to spend a ton of time on eyeballs on this miniature, on really any miniature to be honest. But I always like to have something in there, so I just put a little dot and called it a day. Then I went back to my washes and I started here with Nuln Oil. This I used as a deep shadow basically across the whole miniature. So the deepest recesses, like the sort of where the arm meets the body here, I worked some of that in there. In the lines between his fingers, and again where the leather and stuff meets the skin, I put it in there. Just kind of, this is sort of a part where it's up to your own creativity and discretion. I like to just work it into the deepest recesses, but I also try to not work it into every one of the recesses, so I still preserve some of the previous washed colors that we've used already. Then I got a little bit of Magmadroth Flame, and I worked this into the imperfections in the gun barrel, just to act as a little bit of sort of rust or patina of some sort. This will contrast really nicely with the blue wash that we've already used, and ultimately I think gave a pretty good, um, pretty good looking weathered gun at the end of the day. And then finally, I thought the nails were a little too white, so I just took some Iron Jaws yellow and worked that in right around the nail bed sort of area, just so there's a little bit of a gradient up from yellow to the paler white. So they look, he's running around barefoot in the underhive. His nails aren't going to look that good. And with that, he was done. So right about now, you should be seeing him finished and on his base. I did a really simple base on this guy. In hindsight, I should have put him on a Necromunda base. Double hindsight, though, I realized that if I had done that, I would have had to cut off the tab under his feet. And I really don't like to do that on these old metal miniatures. I like to think that one day, someone might pull them off their base, and they'll be able to tell what they are based on that tab. So I like to keep them on where possible. So I just painted the base silver and then used a black paint marker to draw in some plate lines there, like he's walking around on like metal decking or something like that. But thank you everybody for watching. If you enjoyed the video, I encourage you to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you tomorrow for day 8 of the month of metal.